Welcome to Tales from the Trenches Tuesdays. Today I am absolutely thrilled to have my good friend Micah Garten on board with us. With over a dozen years in progressively senior roles in Ottawa charities, Micah enjoys connecting with community leaders to fulfill their passions and to help create a vibrant and inclusive future. The majority of his free time is spent reading to and playing with his two small children, but when they're asleep, he enjoys cooking for his amazing wife, Jessica. Welcome, Micah.
Thanks, Jack.
So you've been on many visits. We chat about this all the time. Some are good, some are not so good. Can you share with me, without divulging names or anything, what your best canvas was and why?
Yeah, so obviously the probably the road answers are the biggest gift that you secured, or I think as a fundraiser we naturally want to talk about the time you made the perfect connection between donor and passion, and that's our job, right? I would say when I thought about this, that my favorite canvas was actually one where I met with someone who really told me from the get-go that he did not like our organization. One of my predecessors had offended him, and he was unwilling to give, but he was willing to take the meeting. We had about an hour and a half, 2-hour meeting. Brilliant guy, older, really set in his ways. And it was clear that there was no way that I was going to get him to make a gift directly to our organization, but he really appreciated being felt heard. We kept a dialogue going. About a year later, a project came on that our organization was supporting, but that wasn't directly running. And I was able to get a gift from him for that project. Right. And I think, this wasn't a massive gift, but it was a big enough gift, and it was a way to re-engage him. And it really allowed him to know that I was listening and that I was paying attention, and allowed him to make an impact on something that he cared about without going against his principles. And so that was probably the best. And, as I thought through that question, the best canvas is the one where they take the meeting. Right. We have both been on canvases where you get big gifts. But there's no dialogue. There's nothing. Some of them are go away gifts. Some aren't even go away, but it's just sort of rote, right? It's always better when you hear a little more, because then you can get to that place where you connect the donor with their passion, and you can only understand that by having a meeting. So.
Yeah, it seems to be much more challenging when you deal with an annual campaign, because it's kind of hard to go out there with something that's new each and every single year. Obviously you come up with a case for support, but when it's a communal organization, there isn't all that much that changes year over year.
Yeah, and I mean, I struggle with it, right? Having been on smaller grassroots sites, I understand how important those operational dollars are, right? And yet you and I and everybody else knows they're not sexy, right? I only once had a donor tell me they didn't care what I did, and for all they cared, they would pay for the toilet paper because they knew nobody else was willing to do it, right? The reality is, and particularly my generation, right? They want something new, something shiny, and then often on to the next thing. And the challenge for charities is that that's not how they operate. And so having people who understand the mission, and again, I think that's why going back to the volunteer aspect is so important, because when people get engaged in the decision making and peek behind the curtain, and then they understand the value in a different way than a marketing blurb or whatever. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that kind of younger generation. In consulting, numerous times people have said to me, Jack, what do we do about this younger generation? How do we get them involved? And my canned answer is always wait 20 years. They'll be involved, right? So every generation says, the ones that are coming up are never going to be able to do what we're doing. We're doing so much, and this younger generation just isn't doing or picking up its fair share. But yet studies have shown that when the time is right, they actually do rise to the challenge. and they do volunteer. They do come through with those large
So,
gifts.
and I will push back a little on that they're not involved. I think if we are expecting them to give, the lead gifts, we're going to be disappointed. If we expect them to give in the exact way that prior generations did, which is to, pick on my father, he made gifts, huge gifts, right? Undesignated, often fetched privately about the organization and continued to write an even bigger check the next June, right? And
Right.
my friends are not going to be in that place. Now, you want someone who sees a problem and is willing to work to fix it and continue to, right?
Right.
We don't want people who say it's my way or the highway. But the current organization I work for has done a really wonderful job of engaging the younger generation of people in meaningful roles. Right? We have a board that is really young. We have committees that are really young. We have people that we can rely on for a host of expertise. And I think my experience has been when that younger generation sees the impact they can have in that way, that financially they start to support. And you and I both know it's a delicate balance between getting a meaningful gift and getting a statistically meaningful gift, right? If you have to raise $5-10 million a year, right? That's really hard to devote time and effort to, $1,000 or even $5,000 sometimes. And yet at the end of the day, if we don't devote time to working with young philanthropists to get them to give on a personally meaningful level, then it's going to be really hard in 20 years for them to just flip a switch and get there.
Right. No. I think that's a fair statement, and I think that maybe the entrance and that you guys have done a great job is getting them on the volunteer side first, and then as benefactors second, rather than going with the benefactors first and hoping they're going to volunteer.
Yeah, and I just to close the loop there, I really want to emphasize, there are lots of volunteer opportunities. My cohort is not dumb, right? They want a volunteer opportunity that is meaningful and that is respectful. And while they may not have, 50 years work experience, I think most of them are really smart, or the ones that we engage are really smart, and they want to feel like they're doing something useful, not just, lending their name to something or throwing a party or whatever.
Right.
And so that's the best way to really engage them. So open your books, as it were. So.
Yeah. So you chatted about your best canvas. So obviously there's the flip side of that coin, which is what was the worst canvas you had? And we all have doozies that we can talk about.
Yeah. Listen, we have all heard no countless times, right? So it's not that, the worst is honestly, for me anyways, when there's a mistake. Early in my career, probably just not being prepared enough. I came to an organization once where their record keeping was not great. I spoke to a person about making a significant endowment, and they told me that they had actually done so 8 months prior with my predecessor, who hadn't. And that was, just like mortifying because, for me and for the organization, and what stewardship could there have been of this person, all of those factors. And so coming back from that, and just not being respectful of what this person had contributed, which was really meaningful, both to the organization and to them. This was not a go-away gift. This was like a really thoughtful commitment on their part, and for me to not even know it, let alone acknowledge it. Right. That was the worst.
Yeah, I'm a strong advocate of capturing absolutely everything you can in the database and then some. I often have said that the organization's strongest asset is its database, because at some point, each and every one of the staff is going to leave. But the history needs to somehow stay on. And we only have so much corporate history that we can remember in our heads. So when you look at the database, that's the font of information. And had that information been captured, it would have saved you a potentially embarrassing situation.
Yeah, I think the other thing is not-for-profits, particularly smaller ones, which is where I have primarily worked, have not always been great about process, right? And so, when you don't have a process, and we're all flying by the seat of our pants sometimes anyways, so many things can get overlooked. And as a fundraiser, you may not be an operations guru, but you better either get someone or learn how to do that, because you want to make sure that these things become just part and parcel of the operations, and not, reliant on me to be good at entering data, or, versus you or whoever, right?
Yeah. Well, Micah, amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. If folks wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
I have a LinkedIn, I guess.
All right. I'll put those in the show notes.
I have Twitter. I'm not particularly active, just like I don't watch a lot of TV. Not a lot of time on the social, but they can always find me having a scotch on a Friday with my dear friend Jack at NextGen. So that's always a good place.
There you go. Perfect. Micah, thank you so very much for joining. L'chaim.
Shana Tova, Jack.
Hi, folks. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here.